Mira crouched behind a shattered wall, the metallic residue of her spacecraft mingling with the earthy scent of moss and damp soil. Her heart raced beneath her pale blue skin, her wide eyes scanning the desolate landscape that had once been a lush jungle on her home planet of Athelis. The stars twinkled mockingly above her, and the whispered tales of her kind echoed in her mind. Tales of the powerful, weapon-slinging humans who pilfered planets and fought for dominance across galaxies. Hi! She had never thought it would be her turn to plead for survival. Not on this green planet. The sounds of footfalls approached, heavy and menacing. Mira pressed herself lower, praying the shattered stone would offer her sanctuary. Her senses, attuned to danger, recognized the sound. It was the sound of Yetans, the brutish creatures known for their size and relentless pursuit of any living being. They hunted with a ferocity that sent shivers through the bravest of her people. With seconds to spare, Mira caught a glimpse of the shadowy forms that moved through the underbrush, their jagged teeth glistening in the moonlight. Panic surged, and her hand hovered over the small communicator attached to her wrist. But she hesitated. There was still a chance. Barat shouted something over his comm. "You have to move quickly, the door opened." "Wait, too much chaos. A fight was going on here." The voice shouted with a distinct accent, cutting through the tension of the night. It was a confident, human voice, tinged with urgency. It was changing rapidly. Mira's heart skipped. A human? She had only heard stories of them, their brutality, their cunning. But could a human really care enough to save an alien girl like her? Her focus tightened on the sound. All doubt slipped away. It was time to ride on hope's razor edge. Out of the darkness burst a figure, not clad in armor but instead draped in mismatched clothing, oddly bright and annoyingly cheerful for such a grim moment. He panted as he skidded to a halt, glancing left and right as the Yetans' growls rumbled closer. His eyes dropped to Forrest's sight, and his ears pricked up as he searched the entire area before studying the scene. "Okay, focus. Where's the exit? I need a clear path," he shouted. Half to himself, half to the void. Mira blinked, caught off guard by his casual demeanor. Behind him, two Yetans burst through the foliage. They bared their fangs, muscles rippling as they advanced. "Watch out!" Mira yelled, her voice caught somewhere between plea and command. The human turned, and in a flash he dashed towards a fallen log, using his lighter frame to leap onto its carcass. "I can't just let them get you," he said, while flailing an arm as if to sweep away the beasts. "Let's go!" "You can't stay here," shouted the victim, shrieking as they flew at shadow as they fled away from the ship. "Watch me!" "Are you insane?" Mira exclaimed, barely veiling her disbelief. "You have no weapon." "Neither do you," he shot back, his grin both ridiculous and endearing as he glanced back at her. "You think I'm going to let a couple of oversized lizards ruin my heroic moment? No way!" Mira found herself gripping the stone behind her, an absurd mix of annoyance and admiration bubbling within her chest. How could this human, with his patchwork clothes and a surprising smile, think he could save her without a weapon? He was delusional. Yet, there was an odd charm in his wild bravery. As the first Yetan lunged, he leapt down from the log, arms wide, as if trying to embrace the creature rather than defend against it. Timing his move perfectly, he dodged to the side, colliding with the second beast that followed seconds too late. He swayed, threw himself against the legs of the first Yetan, and down they went, a strange, chaotic tumble of limbs and loud growls. As the last of the Yetan fell, the first ponderously concentrated on the large compass blast. Mira nearly laughed in disbelief. How could he succeed where trained warriors had failed? She had seen her own kind falter against these monsters in the past, yet here a human was, deliberately dancing on the edge of danger, without even the barest hint of fear. If these prisoners could do this, how could anyone on the show do? Trying to shake the chaos from her mind, she sprang to her feet and made a break for it. If this human was playing distraction, she would take it, though it felt absurd that she would owe her life to the most unlikely ally. "Keep moving!" he yelled, rolling away from the Yetan's grasping claws. "I've got your back!" With her heart beating wildly, Mira once again stole a glance back. He kicked dirt and leaves into the eyes of the first Yetan, grinning broadly as if he were in the midst of some ludicrous game. An explosion of noise rippled through the trees as they fought. Adrenaline surged within her, brightening the path as she ran. Guess. Sensate me. The path twisted like a serpent, dodging between trees and roots until finally culminating in an open field littered with the remnants of millennia. She could hear the Yetans growling just behind her, but it didn't matter. She was alive, and they were losing their footing in clumsy pursuit. The creatures followed her scents, and she raised a hand. They were soon coming up the mountain. Disappointed and fearful, she turned fear within. The human stumbled not far behind, sweat glistening on his forehead. With a quick glance, his eyes caught the yellows of her skin, the slender form of her being fleeting between shadows, and for him, it sparked a laugh. No offense, lady, but I didn't think I'd be running for my life today. Lady, Mira tightened her jaw with determination. No offense taken if we survive this. It rumbled louder, the Yetans giving chase with new vigor. With a final burst of energy, Mira charged past the last line of trees, and they suddenly found themselves on the brink of a steep cliff, overlooking the gorge below. Beside the way in front of them, Mira saw the gap, sitting in the weather in the same position that had landed on them. We need to jump, she panted, pointing at the rocky outcrop across the chasm. Jump? His eyes widened, a flicker of doubt shading his humor for the first time. You're kidding, right? No time for argument, trust me. The Yetans' guttural roars drew nearer, halting his consideration before he took a breath. Okay, 3, 2, 1. They leaped together, human and alien, the air around them erupting into a terrifying rush as they soared above the dark mouth of the gorge, landing on the rocky outcrop with perhaps a dash of luck and a whole lot of chaos. Panting, they stumbled forward together, their bodies closer than they had anticipated as they wearily caught each other's gaze. It took a moment for the realization of their shared survival to sink in for them both. The battle was far from over. It was far from over. In that moment, Mira saw something in his eyes that intrigued her, a spark of determination that hadn't come from bravado but from a deep-rooted need to protect, an affront to everything her people had learned about humans. What's your name? She asked between breaths, glancing back at the still approaching Yetans. Ben! He shouted, shifting nervously as he glanced at her, and then the looming threat behind. Yeah, nice to meet you, Mira. Now let's figure out how we escape these beasts, shall we? As the tension melted into a frantic rhythm, they danced on the cliff's edge, alien and human, two worlds, at odds but trembling toward an unknown alliance woven by fate. Each would learn from the other, each would challenge their beliefs. Together they would navigate the chaos of their worlds, as unpredictable and strange as the bond that wove between them. Mira and Ben stood precariously on the rocky outcrop, their breaths mingling in a haze of adrenaline and disbelief. The Yetans below roared in frustration, their massive figures silhouetted against the now starlit sky, swirling to and fro like storm clouds weighing down on an impossible horizon. It was a breathtaking sight. But urgency drowned out awe. They couldn't remain in a position that threatened to turn from miraculous escape to triumphant meal for the creatures. Now what? Ben asked between gasps, his eyes darting between the cliff's edge and the jagged terrain below. Mira's heart raced as she tried to think quickly. We can't go back. They'll corner us if we do. We need to find a way down, but we can't attract more attention, she replied, urgency tightening her voice. That gap looks shallow, but it might just be enough. Follow me. With determination, she stepped carefully to the edge of the outcrop. The chasm below was steep, peppered with sharp rocks and overgrown foliage that whispered promises of danger. The last thing she needed was to miscalculate their next move. She turned halfway, meeting Ben's anxious gaze. Aaron returned the gaze, mask in fear, the dark expanse of the swarm of gravitrons. But the distortion was gone, and she focused on the road ahead. You ready? Am I ever? Let's do this. He quirked a smile, attempting to infuse bravery into his words, but behind that expression lay the telltale signs of fear. Mira couldn't blame him. This was uncharted territory for both of them. She took a deep breath and leaped, arms outstretched, landing on a thick bough that dipped low under her weight. It creaked ominously, yet the earth beneath boasted enough solid ground that the branches remained stable, a brief reprieve in their harrowing flight. The pursuers rose, one of the first to descend. "Make sure you're centered when you land," Mira called back, somehow feeling a rush of confidence in leading this fragile partnership. It instilled a sense of purpose, even if panic edged at her consciousness. It was instinct now, the same sense that had guided her since childhood. The pressure turned to fear. She shook her head. Ben followed after a heartbeat, to Mira's momentary concern. He landed close enough that the bough swayed again, sending a tingle of fear through her muscles, but he steadied himself a moment later, sparkles of triumph in his eyes as he grinned back at her. He was getting the hang of this. 6, declared Martin. 6. The bouncing gate lurched higher. "Clever idea," he said, that goofy smirk returning as they stood surveying the dark forest perimeter sprawled out beneath them. "So, what's the plan? You seem to be a professional now." Mira bit her lip. Part of her wanted to allow his lightheartedness to wash over her, but serious stakes loomed. "We can't stop here. We need to find cover. Something solid." "Leave it to me," he insisted, pointing toward a tangle of large trees shrouded in shadow, a natural alcove away from their pursuers. "I'll take the lead." "You said she was pissed at your abuser," Roy answered. "I admire who you are." Before she could formulate a response, he moved ahead without hesitation, disappearing into the foliage. Mira followed, the darkness closing in around them as they navigated the dense underbrush. "Then wait," she called, her voice hushed yet firm, her counter to the thrumming anxiety in her chest. He paused, looking back over his shoulder, the playful spark just lingering in the depths of his expression. "I thought I was being all mysterious and brave," he teased lightly. "I didn't think you'd want to miss the show." Mira rolled her eyes but couldn't help the reluctant smile that played at her lips. "Courage is not charging ahead recklessly. Like the stories of my people say, even a coward can leap into danger without thought." "Touche." He stepped closer. "Then let's strategize for a moment, before we go bumbling into the night. No need to stir up trouble we can easily avoid." Proximity rattled her. His casual confidence warmed something buried deep. Bearing the weight of survival together forged a strange, unsteady alliance, with all that lingered between them. What do humans do for trouble anyway? Salvage. Ben laughed lightly, the sound rich and infectious against the tense backdrop. "Oh, we invent ways to fall into trouble and get out of it. It's practically a family tradition." The act of disarming their surroundings eased tension, even as the growls echoed ominously from above and behind. Mira focused, scanning her surroundings. "We need to find something to use at least. Do you have any tools hidden in that outfit of yours?" "Tools? My wardrobe doesn't include a Swiss Army jacket," he said with mock dismay, patting down his pockets. "But I do have my wits." The glimmer of familial banter morphed into deeper, more logical conversation. "Then we must combine our wits." Just then, a crashing sound not far from their alcove drew their collective attention. 2 Yetans barreled through the foliage, snarling, the very soil beneath them quaking with their heavy footfalls. They split in different directions, each on a search that brought them dangerously closer to their hiding space. Go below and throw yourself in safety." Without a word, Mira tensed. It was time to act. "To the right, they'll expect us to run left." At her command, they emerged from the alcove precisely as one of the beasts prowled closer to their hiding spot. She pivoted, pushing Ben through the jagged openings between trees and close foliage. They danced around trunks, narrowly avoiding being caught as confusion mounted behind them. A loud crash came from overhead, the moans of assistance sound. Ben's face flushed with excitement, a thrill coursing through him as they ran wild beneath the blooms of alien night. The weight of his previous jest hung above them, and instead of fear, exhilaration replaced it. They were alive, moving. They were alive, moving. Then it came. That vast clearing where moonlight bled across the terrain, illuminating their path. Hope fled only to be replaced with dread. They were exposed. The path ahead snaked into a rocky formation, uneven stones that could lead to sanctuary or further danger. Sankaroo Sharpie. Mira took a deep breath, her alien instincts responding to the anomaly before her. If we can scale the rocks, we might be able to level the odds. Ugh. Level what exactly? Ben squinted at her as he caught up, panting slightly. It's not like we've got slingshots hidden under our clothes. No, Mira replied firmly, feeling a spark of her own idea blooming within. But we do have the height advantage. If we can lure them... You should probably talk to Conrad, said Isiku. Right now? Ben looked doubtful. Lure them? I'm not sure enchanting roaming monsters is in the instructional manual. It's our only chance. They can't follow us if we utilize the rocks. Her mind raced as she painted the picture in her head. What wouldn't have been a plan at all for one of her kind had turned into something resourceful. You distract them while I climb. I'd prefer not to be monster bait. He gave a reluctant chuckle but nodded. But I get it. Sometimes you've got to be the decoy, huh? A pulse of camaraderie surged through her, a gratitude for his willingness to step into the fire alongside her, despite the risks. Then run fast! She grinned despite herself. Ready? You are efficient. Fade button. Ready, he shouted, pushing off. As he dashed towards the expanse, Mira scrambled up the rocks, praying that the earth remained steady under her feet. She heard Ben shout louder, challenging the beast to focus on him, as his wild voice cut through the encroaching chaos. They weren't just surviving any longer. There was a chance to thrive in this madness, to reclaim their shattered worlds. It sparked a resolve deep within her that had been missing, igniting hope, not simply for her life, but for whatever emergence might lay beyond the anger and fear. No pirates, she declared firmly. Mira reached the top just in time to see Ben weave through the trees, his laughter mingling with the growls of Yetans now focused on their prey. The first beast burst out, but Ben's agile reflection turned the surprisingly seamless dance into a new rhythm. The innocence and fearlessness with which he fought filled her with a newfound understanding. Humans faced insurmountable odds with a fire that didn't always come from armor and weapons. From this point on, it wouldn't matter who wielded what. But you never gave in. You can't fear something you haven't faced. The blazing screen echoed around the... No! She shouted from her vantage point as Ben danced on unsteady breaths. With a quick glance, he nodded and bounded forward, gripping at the branches and rocks, leading the beasts just out of reach while she readied herself at the edge of the precipice above. Halighter, the commander rasped curtly, his sights shifting from the river to the precipice above. With a leap and swish of her arms, she kicked stones down the sheer height towards the creatures below. They rumbled in confusion, blustered roars echoing through the grove as they staggered at the missed prey, all amid a chaos that felt exhilarating, unpredictable, the essence of their collaboration. A pair of half-matted Valyrian space army units, and the bassoon. Mira, I need a corner! Ben felled a tree branch, using it as a weapon but didn't miss a beat, darting beneath foliage. Hot. Over here. With one swift move she beckoned him forward, knowing the danger was acute and still looming, yet somehow a smirk formed upon her lips. Together they crafted their way through peril, exhilarated by the tightrope they danced, the monster-laden whispers that threaded between them. His plan made Grimm's eyes as he followed the line of her hand. Her fingers caressed his arm. Each misstep, every narrow escape. They fortified a bond not by mere words but by the rhythm of survival, a wild melody of chaos turning to trust. Here, in the shadows of danger, they were molding their friendship from the stuff of panic and their disparate worlds, revealing layers deeper than mere human-alien feud, layers of ingenuity, bravery, and connection that a knife or blaster could never forge. Without their standards for kindness. As dawn began to break on the horizon, illuminating their flight with a delicate orange, the shadows of the Yetans gradually dwindled. They paused, breaths mingled, and caught each other's eyes, realizing that torn between two galaxies was the hope of constructing a new resolution. Ready to find out what comes next? Ben's voice broke through, the sunlight pulling on a grin that reflected every ounce of optimism he held. Definitely, Mira said, feeling elation bubbling under her skin. Together. Together. That singular word rang true, sparking a path as they prepared to uncover just where their partnership might take them in a galaxy full of uncertainty. In that moment, two worlds began to intertwine, crafting futures that pulsed with the very heartbeat of their mutual survival and understanding, forever altering what they had once believed of their own kind. The vibrant hues of dawn washed over the rocky outcrop, cascading into the jungle below as the remnants of their harrowing escape faded into cautious silence. Mira and Ben caught their breath, the scent of earth and dew mingling in the fresh morning air. What had begun as a flight from danger had morphed into an unexpected journey of discovery. "Did we lose them?" Ben panted, brushing off dirt from his clothes. "I think so," Mira said cautiously, leaning against a jagged rock, her eyes scanning the landscape. The Yetans' roars had gradually receded, their howls blending into the symphonies of morning's first light. For now, at least. For now, a pause enveloped them, thick with unspoken realizations. They had ventured through danger and emerged together, two unlikely allies forged by chaos and a shared will to survive. But more than that, they couldn't ignore the unarticulated bond that had formed between them, friendship knitting threads that transcended their starkly different worlds. "What do we do now?" Ben's question broke the serenity. "The rest of the Yetan pack will probably search again. First, we gather our bearings and find somewhere safe to plan," Mira replied, the urgency returning to her voice. "If there's a way to outsmart these bounty hunters, there has to be a way to gain the upper hand against the Yetans, too." Ben nodded, moving away from the cliff. "Let's split up and scout for higher ground. We need a vantage point." Mira's heart raced at the idea. The thought of him trekking off alone churned uneasily in her stomach. "Wait, if you're scouting, I should go with you. I thought you said your kind is usually good at climbing." A half-teasing grin brightened his demeanor. "I'll just take a look around and return quick." "You may be right, but we don't know the extent of their territory," she insisted, her voice firm but laced with concern. "We're better off together. Consider it another adventure." He chuckled, the warmth in his eyes catching her unawares. "All right, but if we get ambushed again, I expect you to come up with a better move than throwing stones." "Shit." Nemesis' words tumbled over one another, noise filling the night. With a shared determination, they set out carefully through the thick foliage, moving stealthily to avoid drawing attention from both the Yetans prowling the land and the remnants of the world's dangers. Scaling vines and weaving their way through dense undergrowth, the tension from their previous encounters mingled with a lighter air of camaraderie. They pointed out interesting flora, exchanged thoughts on their cultures, and sprouted laughter with each misstep as they climbed higher. Once they were safely ahead, "I could never grow anything like this on Athelis," Mira remarked, pausing to admire a cluster of colorful flowers thriving amidst the sharp rocks. "Everything on my world is intertwined with technology. Beautiful, but structured." The second princess joined her, later the ship's most important crew with present. She gazed upon the planet. Let's dig a hole. 16,000. Structured like a car manual?" Ben jested, bending down to examine the unusual blooms. "Or an IKEA assembly guide?" Apparently HI sat through to the final test. "Sure, that's somewhat accurate," she laughed, realizing how easy it was becoming to share herself with him. "Yes, very detailed, precisely laid, and sadly lacking imagination. Everything must be implemented with purpose. There is little room for play." Pausing, Ben looked up at her, curiosity brimming in his gaze. "And is that a bad thing?" The girl's smile faded. Then she dropped her gaze, her face cloudy. Mira straightened, considering her answer. "Freedom lives in play. Creativity thrives in unpredictability. I think. Sometimes we lost our way in pursuing what is perfect. A flicker of understanding crossed his face as he nodded, a brief fumbling with words evident. I get that. We humans have a knack for messing things up too, he admitted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It's kind of our specialty. Pip, Mark, good. They navigated past the cliff face and suddenly found themselves atop a ridge overlooking an expanse of forest, its trees interwoven like a tapestry. Look at this view, Ben exclaimed, his eyes bright with wonder. You can see everything. Mira joined him, gasping. Below lay a sprawling expanse of greenery speckled with glimmers of sunlight. But amid the beauty was the reality of their plight. The Yetans remained a threat. Mira, what if we think more out of the box? Ben said suddenly, scanning the horizon. We have to make ourselves unnoticeable. Instead of confronting them, what if we devised a plan where they won't even see us coming? Allude to them not recognizing us? She pondered, the wheels in her mind spinning. You're suggesting camouflage? Exactly, but it would take a few crafty ideas. They rely on their strength and senses. If we can mask our presence, blend in Yetans, the Yetans might lose track of us. A thrill of excitement surged within her. That just might work, Ben. We'll need mud, leaves, probably some foliage to break our shapes, just like we did before in the trees, he enthused, his eyes sparkling with creativity. And we can use their senses against them, she added, the gears aligning. If I could leverage the natural sense of the forest, we may be able to obscure our own signature. Brilliant! He shifted his weight, adrenaline pulsing through him. Let's gather supplies and head back down. The sooner we get moving, the better. Rushing back into the heart of the wild, they dug up mud, collected pebbles, leaves, and anything that could obscure their forms. Whenever a rustle or call echoed through the trees, they hopped silently, heartbeats quickening, yet reveling in the shared excitement. Let's get this right, Ben said, squatting beside her as they started smearing mud across their arms and faces. The air hung heavy with equal parts mischief and trepidation. They won't expect two weirdos like us to outsmart their pack. If we want the element of surprise, we have to embrace the roles of unassuming prey. Whispered Denton, his voice a small room. As night drew closer, they finally plastered themselves into a semblance of nature. Mira draped in broadleaves, Ben creating a bizarre semblance of gecko-like camouflage. Under the cover of darkness, they blended seamlessly into the environment. Embracing the thrill of the unknown, they stood ready on a branch overlooking the depths of the forest, eyes trained on the undergrowth where the shadows danced. As a slight noise in the thicket of the night, Tara started to drift off. Attempting to drift into the cover of the forest, eyes trained on the undergrowth where the shadows danced. Okay, we await our unsuspecting visitors, Ben whispered with a smirk, excitement brewing beneath their improvised disguise. Okay. Mira couldn't help but smile back, the atmosphere shimmering with the promise of their audacious plan. All those different worlds and cultures swirling amidst the unlikely friendliness. They alone had cultivated this alliance and situated them beneath the wild moonlight, laughter echoing despite the unease brewing within their course. The branches swayed in subtle whispers as thuds resonated through the forest, followed by snarls, a sign of the Yetan presence growing closer with every heartbeat. A shadow fell over where they sat, prompting Mira to hold her breath. They're coming, she murmured, signaling for Ben to remain still. Through the undergrowth, the hefty forms of the Yetans appeared, their eyes glinting like fire in the dark. They seem confused, Ben whispered, peering down through the foliage with fascination. Could be our chance. Malcolm. Mira watched, caught between thoughts of fear and exhilaration, the thrill of the hunt feeling like a pulse of life. But they were not hunting. They were outsmarting. Protecting what had formed between them, friendship built through the chaos of creature-featured antics, she warned the gang around her not to suggest she'd insult Captain Sawyer. Just then, the primary Yetan swung its head, sniffing the air with eager ferocity. Stay still, Mira whispered. But in a flurry of confusion and the primal urge to escape, Ben shifted slightly, the leaves rustling with a hollow sound. Mira, he hissed. The Yetan turned, eyes narrowing and surveying the branches. No, She grasped his arm, nudging him firmly back behind their makeshift cover. Stay! To their disbelief, the creature lunged directly toward where they were. Instinct ignited in her veins, and, in a moment of clarity, she spotted above a gnarled tree limb stretching slightly downward, elongating from the other side. The perfect bait to divert the beast. Now! She yelled, her voice breaking through the chaos as they leapt into action together. Mira propelled Ben toward the branch. He grasped it tightly, swinging it just as the Yetans' howling proximity approached the branch. The blow startled the beast, drawing its attention away from narrowing in on them. Run! Mira shouted, the rush propelling them both backward into the dense underbrush. Beneath the cover of the wild, adrenaline surged between them, charged by the electricity of teamwork. The Yetan, enraged, slammed into the very branch meant to obscure them, snapping it like a twig. Commanders looked around. They sprinted breathlessly through dim passages of trees, caring little for the obstacles, branches scraping at their faces as they moved forward. For the moment, they were genuinely united, hearts, minds, and feet pounding one beat. The creature called after them with a monstrous bellow, but amidst the thicket of shadows the forest suddenly trembled. It all felt surreal as their laughter erupted amid their flight, a testament not to naive irreverence, but to sheer survival. We're actually doing this, Ben shouted, as if buoyed by the thrill of it all. Don't say that, she laughed, breathless and filled with renewed hope. They surged deeper into the forest, moving instinctively as the chaos that surrounded them wheeled into static calm. It sounded as if the ground beneath echoed with a promise for a new beginning, free of judgment or expectation. She searched, craning her neck for a sound of their pursuers. They couldn't be heard. They paused again and spread. Did you think my one trick was all I had? Ben quipped, the buoyancy of laughter billowing alongside them, and for this moment, nothing else mattered. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a fork, a larger creek, bordered on either side by dense thickets. The coolness of the water sparkled, reflecting shades of the sky above. Breathing heavily, they paused, exchanging hopeful glances. We did it, Mira said, leaning against a tree for support, her voice barely above a whisper. We actually did it. Ben's grin widened, lighter after all they had experienced. Your brains and my brains? I'd say we're a pretty smart team. Perhaps we should get to make this a regular thing, Mira replied, feeling the weight of fear lift off her shoulders, leaving a sweet tingle of friendship that she had never expected. As they regained their breaths, hearts expanding not just with gratitude, but with newfound understanding, Mira realized that what had been a chance encounter had transformed into something greater. End of Chapter 6. Events in the Star-Spangled Banner occupied the main part of a story. Soon, as morning broke and flooded through the trees, illuminating the world with clear light, they would unleash their plan to outsmart the Yetans and reclaim their sense of safety. Together. The landscape stretched before them, unaltered and lovely, a tapestry yet to be unfurled between human and alien. A world of possibilities lay just beyond the horizon, and beneath it all, there pulsed a rhythm of connection that forged bravery, resilience, and friendship. Brian shook his head. This is it, he agreed. The bus takes off in a second, but this is going to be my pace. Somewhere deep beneath the surface of their initial skepticism, trust had taken root. A coalition that promised more than mere survival. It was the dawn of an extraordinary adventure, rife with ideas of hope and potential. Mira looked at Ben, her heart swelling, and she felt her world expand into the breadth of this human boy who had saved her without a weapon, only with the purity of his heart and his choices to care. And in that profound, shared moment, she embraced the possibility of creativity that existed in every corner of the universe, reminding her that sometimes battling monsters meant choosing connection over conflict. And together, they would thrive.